Hello, welcome to The Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. We're going to be looking at the Battlescroll update, which is Games Workshop's quarterly, so every 3 months, balance update to Age of Sigmar 4. They've pretty much released one on time all of the time. However, as I've made clear in a previous video, it would be nice to get a little bit more clarity on when they're going to drop it. So Wednesday today, and they've dropped it in the afternoon. So kind of nice, I guess, for events coming up soon, especially good for some really large events like the Age of Sigmar World Team Championships. Anyway, I'm going to be going through all of the details as I normally do. Me and the chat right now have been talking about it already for about an hour, and we're going to do more of a deep dive. But if there's anything I miss, it's a huge document that's really badly laid out, then please do let me know in the comments below. I always enjoy reading these things. And then, just let me know what you've seen or, any changes you would like to see. I think we should probably start this video by looking at what the current meta is. I've been at Adepticon, which is in America, for a week, so I haven't been able to do a couple of the stat shows. However, Warhammer Rob, our stat man in field, has been able to bring me all of the information. In fact, the stats I'm about to show you are from the beginning of the last Battlescroll update, so the last balance patch, until and including this weekend events just gone. So this is a 100% all-encompassing snapshot look at what this Battlescroll data has looked like, and I will be breaking that down even more in a separate video. So if we're just going to look at 2 stats for now. You can see that Flesh Eater Courts are clearly a very problematic army. They definitely need a huge change, and obviously doing the stat show every Monday, we've also seen Morbin Knights, so the Morbeg Knights, but also the Battlescroll update that Games Workshop last gave us to increase Flesh Eater Courts, who are near the bottom, has really made them yo-yo from the bottom all the way to the top. And as you can see, a pretty impressive 59% win rate. One of the things here is Idoneth Deepkin, and we're going to look at another stat at the minute, which is really going to showcase just how oppressive they are. However, their meta representation, how many people play them, is quite low. Sons of Behemoth is also up there, Slaves to Darkness as well. So Slaves to Darkness, interestingly, at a 51% win rate, as well as Stormcast Eternals. But both of those 2 armies have got an absolutely massive meta representation, over 10% of the meta, which means that you generally will find a smaller skill set at the bottom, a lower skill expression in a larger population who plays that army. Therefore, that brings the win rate down. However, they still score quite a lot of 4-1s and 5-0s. So hopefully we'll see some changes to those as well. Specifically, I guess we want to see Chosen, Varangard, and Be'lakor dealt with. In Deepkin's case, I think the issue is that they're just played by a lot of good players. It's quite a fragile army. Flesh Eater Courts obviously is the recursion. That's the change we're looking for. I should have said those as we go. Seraphon have had a bit of a rise thanks to an FAQ that the last Battlescroll update making Croak more relevant, and they have become it has become very relevant. It is the only meta build now, Croak. Slaanesh is an interesting one at 50%. They also haven't really had any bonuses, to be honest, but people have been spamming a lot of archers, which has worked really well. If we start looking at the bottom of the pack, you can see that Kruleboyz, who've just recently had their book, are doing very poorly. Nighthaunt also low after several nerfs, were definitely the boogeyman at the start of Age of Sigmar 4. But I think that's just because a lot of the players that picked up the easy win army, which is Nighthaunt, and moved on to other armies, have just left the regular Nighthaunt players in there, and they're struggling a bit. Skaven also low. Now, Skaven is, I think, misrepresentative. Even though their win rate is low, 43%, their meta rep is high, but there is at least 2 builds which are super, well, 3 really, 18 Storm Fiends in the Menagerie. We've also seen the absolutely egregious 180 Clan Rats out from Tom Guan, and also we've seen all Rattling Guns all the time. Soulblight Gravelord's about to get a new book, and Gitz at 44%. High meta representation again. Troll's still good, just had their new book. Might be people just learning how to play, or people not playing them as much until they can really work out what list to play. Waiting for those points to drop is quite a long time. So that's what we'd like to see from the Battlescroll update. We'd like to see some big changes for at least Kruleboyz, make them better. Ossiarch Bonereapers, maybe get some points adjustments for those as well. I personally think Skaven actually are okay, so I wouldn't want anything for that. Soulblight new book, Nighthaunt. Flesh Eater Courts, we need to come down. Deepkin, we need to come down. Slaves to Darkness. I mean, the internal balance on Slaves to Darkness is just terrible, and I wouldn't mind some changes there as well. Everything else is kind of fit into an okay bracket. So let's go find out what is in the Battlescroll. So first thing we're going to look at are the core changes, or the changes to rules, which are going to affect all of the different armies. So they've done an errata to using abilities. In the last Battlescroll update, they accidentally made this insane situation where, a bit like Aussie Man, if you've ever seen his videos, which is not Warhammer related, sorry, where what could happen with a reaction is I could say, no, I pass. And then my opponent could say, I pass. And then you could be like, I pass. And you could pass until one of you died. They've now deleted that. That's actually on the next page. You can see that here. That's been deleted. And instead, they've just been very clear, although kind of a little bit awkward with how they've worded it. Starting with the player using the ability, the players alternate using any abilities with an appropriate reaction. The unfortunate thing about Games Workshop is they're a little bit on the prudish side. And as we've seen with clocks and them being inappropriate, they only want you to use appropriate reaction times. And while appropriate reaction does get over the intent, it's also a little bit awkward because it doesn't mean anything in gaming terminology. In reality, though, players can choose to pass instead of using a reaction. But once both players consecutively pass, no further reactions to that ability can be used. Okay, good. That's excellent. That's a good clarification, which is clearing up a problem they created in the last balance patch. In fact, many of the changes are just clearing up problems they created in the last balance patch, which is kind of fun. The next one, Guarded Hero, is a nice piece of clarity you can see here. What they've basically done is they've made it, Guarded Hero is an ability where if you're not within 12 inches of a hero or infantry unit, right, they cannot be picked to be shooting attacks. Cannot be picked to be targeted by shooting attacks. Previously, what would happen is only one, if the unit was just, imagine one model in the unit was just within range, then the whole unit could shoot. Now, it's on a model by model basis. So if only one model was in, only one model will be able to shoot. That's the change. That's quite nice because it means that shooting unit has to be a little bit closer in order to affect that change. So that's good. So the next one is going to cause a lot of, not controversy, but confusion, because it's one of the most changed rules in Age of Sigmar 4, and it's to do with the command ability covering fire. This is generic command ability, which basically lets you shoot in your opponent's turn. What they've changed, I could read the whole thing to you, but what they've changed is they've changed it so that you cannot pick manifestations or faction terrain features as the target of the ability of covering fire. Now, you already couldn't target manifestations because they weren't a unit previously, or maybe you could, but I don't think you could. But either way, what they're doing is they're showing clarity here. So even if manifestations and the rule amount manifestations covers it, then they've just included it in this, which actually I'm a big advocate for, and I'm going to keep talking about the fact that they should do this. I don't mind rules being a little bit more wordy. Throw me a bunch of edge case bullet points in there, and I'm okay with it. Okay, I can shoot my opponent's turn. Awesome. Closest unit? Yeah, no problem. What if they're behind a piece of terrain and I can't see them? Does that count? You can just bullet point those in, and that's okay, because when something's a little confusing, I don't want to have to jump to another page to understand it. So this is good, and I'm very happy with it. It's a great change. Or it's a great clarity, sorry. It's not necessarily a change. Also, the thing that's going to make people a little bit complicated, the thing that is complicated and going to make people a little bit confused, and they're going to talk about a lot, is has this changed whether or not you can redeploy and shoot? And yes, that's been covered many times. If you have a run and shoot ability, then you're going to be able to redeploy and shoot unless it's specifically called out that you can't. That's how that works. Because, to be clear, there is something called the run ability and a keyword run ability. So they're different. And the run ability is also a keyword run ability. Personally, your current YouTube maker and streamer thinks that they should not have made an ability and a keyword really be the same thing. But maybe they'll get that in the next edition. The next bit that they've covered is a change to obscuring, which is a keyword for terrain. A unit cannot be targeted by shooting attacks made by enemy units that are not within its combat range if it's behind a holy or on this terrain feature, unless that's the fly keyword. What this basically means is previously something like Paladors, or specifically the Paladors with shock javelins or whatever they're called, would be able to charge into a unit in obscuring terrain, but wouldn't be able to shoot because they were quote unquote obscuring. So now you're going to be able to do that. Basically means if a unit's in obscuring, you can shoot them if you're in combat with them, right? So also imagine shooting combat units, weapons as well, because previously you couldn't. That's a great change. Just quickly going to mention that they also clarified that if you are a power level 2 wizard, which means you can cast 2 spells, but you miscast on the first spell, which means you would no longer be able to cast, can you still do a banishment, which is a different ability to casting spells? So the answer is yes, you can do that because while you draw from the same power pool to do banishments. So for example, if I'm power level 2 and I do a banishment, then I can only cast 1 spell. Or if I do no banishments, I can cast 2 spells. In this case, you can miscast and still do a banishment because they're separate abilities, but you draw from the same resource in order to be able to do them. So that's that clarity there. If that ever comes up, and almost feel like no one's ever going to remember that, but it's worth knowing. Our next ability, or the next change, is to manifestations. Again, very complicated part of the game. And all they've done is they've expressed that if one part of a 2-part manifestation is in combat, then both parts are in combat. If you have a mobile manifestation that's able to pile in and attack, and it's on one piece of it, like one ball of a Geminid, is in combat, then you're going to be able to take the other ball and pile in towards the unit that it's in combat with, or the unit that it's piled in towards, which is nice because it means maybe you'll be able to attack with the other. So that's just some clarity. If your balls get separated, they're both in combat. The next rules update is to clarify whether or not a War Master like Sigvald can be a hero in another unit's regiment. The answer is yes, but only if your army includes another War Master. So War Master always has to be your general, and then another War Master could potentially, if the regiment system allows it, be a hero in a general's regiment. In this case, Sigvald in something like Shalaxi, I think she's a War Master, or Glutos could be a hero in that War Master's regiment. So on this Battlescroll update, it does say that Prized Beast, which is one of the Honor Guard abilities, which is a seasonal rule that will go out of date in the summer, in like 3 months' time, has had a very minor grammar change and clarification here. But ultimately, what it does is it allows you to pick a friendly, non-unique monster unit. So non-unique, which is a keyword, monster, which is a unit type, that has not been reinforced, so that you can't have forced on Honor Guard, only 2, and which is in, but not leading a regiment to be that regiment's Honor Guard, and you can pick a unit that's in reserve, okay? And then that unit can ignore the effects of the battle damaged ability in addition, which would be where the unit gets worse. In addition, this adds 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by the Honor Guard. This ability also affects companion weapons. Now, one of the big reasons this has changed is because of the Charybdis. As we know, the Charybdis, which has seen no points changes in all of Age of Sigmar 4, is perfectly balanced and often seen in shelves and stores, or on shelves and in stores, but not actually on the table. And so this allows you to pick units like that and give them +1 to hit. But truthfully, it's actually used for Stormdrake Guard, which Games Workshop clearly weren't selling enough of. So that's the only it's not really a change, but it's something to be aware of. The next change is to priority target ability. Does each model in the attacking unit, which is an Honor Guard ability, does each model in the attacking unit need to be within 12 inches of the target to benefit from the +1 to hit and wound rolls, or does the attacking unit need to be within 12 inches of the target? Unlike the guarded hero ability we saw earlier, the attacking unit needs to be within 12 inches of the target. So in this case, the entire unit, no, not the entire unit, just one model in the unit needs to be within 12 inches. That's what this change is. So what kind of awkward. One ability is only one model. The other ability is one model and the whole unit is counted, but who's counting? So there you go. That's worth looking at. Now we're going to start looking at the individual factions and the changes that have been made to them. So the first one, obviously, is our standout problem child in Age of Sigmar right now, the Flesh Eater Courts. The chat really want me to say they got fecked, but I refuse to say it, so I'm not saying it. But they have had a nerf. First change, actually, little caveat before I talk about all of the faction stuff and generally most of the points. Having covered this a long time, in my opinion, points changes that are very incremental on large models, let's say Archeon for some reason went down 10 points, that's ridiculous, okay? And obviously not even worth talking about. I'm sure someone will say, as a meta build, it allows you to put insert some of the unit into a very specific build type, but I don't really care much about that for me personally. However, where point changes can be a little bit like incremental is when, as we've seen in Age of Sigmar 4 a lot, people take the same unit over and over and over again, even when they reinforce it. So with Morbeg Knights, as an example, about to talk about that in a moment, they get a 20-point increase per 3, which means when you reinforce the unit, that's going to be 40 points. And then when you take 18 of them, you have lost 120 points. The real question in that situation is, do you actually lose a unit from an army, or do you gain a unit from an army? In the case of Cities of Sigmar, which we'll look at, you probably will be able to save something like 100 points right now. Is that enough to put one extra unit in your army, or take a unit of, let's say, Steel Helms and maybe upgrade them to something like Fusiliers? Maybe. Is that enough of a change? It's a very soft touch, and the changes really won't be felt when you're playing Kruleboyz up against something like Flesh Eater Courts, as an example for now, or Deepkin is another good example. So I'm always a little critical of those very small point changes, but I will acknowledge where they're more impactful is when you have a unit that you take multiple times. However, it's only impactful if they take it multiple times. So as an example, if you don't decide to take 18 Morbeg Knights, instead only take 12, you've only really added 80 points onto your list, and it's still probably fine. Big changes, though, are things like this, where we see rules changes. And we have seen that for Flesh Eater Courts. They have gone to amend the change that they made in the last Battlescroll update. The battle formation of Raise the Banners, which for Lords was for Lords of the Manor, which is a battle formation, which is one of the sub-factions. Each time an ability returns at least one slain model to a unit, this is the ability and what it does. That is not in combat. That's new. Not in combat is new. Previously, you could do it in combat, which is, yikes, really bad. Not fun at all. I didn't even know you could do it in combat. And that sucks. Okay, so not in combat anymore. Big love. After that ability has been resolved, if that unit is a Serfs unit, you can return one slain model to it. And if it's a Knights unit, and this is the problem that happened with the Morbeg Knights, you roll a dice, and on a 4-up, you can return one additional slain model. Previously, you didn't need the 4-up. So this is a double nerf, I guess, to the ability where you can no longer be in combat, and if you want to return a Morbeg Knight, you need to roll a 4-up. So it's only going to happen now 50% of the time, whereas previously, it was 100% of the time. So this is a big, massive change, especially when we go and look at the points changes. We can see that the Abhorrent Cardinal's gone up 10 points. But importantly, down here, you can see that the Morbeg Knights has gone up 20 points per 3. So please see my previous discussion about points up and down. Ustran, who's also taken all the time, is up 20 points. I personally find that to be a little bit miserly. Also, it's almost zero impact. But with the way Age of Sigmar 4 is written, where most of your faction abilities really are centered around those large centerpiece models, doing a points increase on the unit you almost have to take feels a little cheap. Just going to say it. But they have tried to make other units be something you take, like the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist or the Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon. They're down 20 points, and I'm going to say this a lot, so I'm not going to keep repeating myself, otherwise it'll get super boring doing it. I don't care about a 20-point reduction on a Ghoul King on Terrorgeist or up. Morbeg Knights might be an impact, I don't know. Don't be a coward. Just make them 50 points cheaper and see what the game looks like. At least that's fun. And that's what you want from a balanced patch. You want something that's really fun. So that's Flesh Eater Courts. Is this enough? I think this is plenty. They previously, before the last balance update, weren't doing very well. They have a very interesting recursion mechanic, which means they've got quite an elastic play style, which, if they're too fragile, they'll just lose a lot, which is what we saw before the last Battlescroll update. So I think this is easily enough to take the edge off Flesh Eater Courts and bring them into line to where they were. So good. Well, good change by Games Workshop. Our next army updated is the Hedonites of Slaanesh. 50% win rate at the moment in the game. And if you were to ask me, are they a 5-0 army? I would argue that they are not a 5-0 army. So no, they definitely need, in my opinion, especially some internal balance issues. They would need some points up. However, they have made a small amendment to their battle trait, which is their allegiance ability you can see here. They have then written the entire rule out versus telling you what they amended, which is a little bit awkward. But the Slaanesh players in the chat have told me it's either got something to do with being able to give someone 2 temptation dice on a 3d6 charge, or the fact that the charge dice count as unmodified. either of the two. Whatever the situation, Slaanesh players in the chat, please let me know. However, there is some points changes. They have made it so that Glutos can include a little fella. Some of the units, all of the units actually, not all of the units, but all of the armies have got the ability to take like a captain-style small support character in their regiments. So you take a hero to lead a regiment, then you take a little support character. Each army, amazingly and beautifully, has got a different name for it. For Slaanesh, they're called Dark Egotists. Why don't they just say sergeant for everyone is beyond me. Anyway, Glutos can now have one, which is good. That's actually really good, especially with the updates that they've put in the last Battlescroll update, where you can get like +2 movement from those characters, which is really, really good. So Shalaxi also got a points change, almost enough of a points change that I would think that it matters. So maybe if they're on 50, 60 points, but down 30, that's great. Sigvald got cheaper as well. Sigvald is a War Master, which means technically you could kind of include Sigvald in his own regiment, but you can't because you can only have one of them. Otherwise, that would be amazing because you would kind of break the app. And then the only other point change is Blissbarb Seekers have gone up. Now, many of these units, specifically the chariots, I expect to go away eventually from the Slaanesh range. But I wouldn't have minded seeing the Keeper come down a little bit as well, even though he features a lot. And I wouldn't have minded seeing generally a little bit of a buff to some of the units in his army. Maybe you could have made Fiends even cheaper. I think that would have been okay. You could have potentially bought, I don't know if you can bring the Painbringers down anymore. You could have brought the Slangor down loads more. Maybe the Slickblade Seekers I could have seen come down as well. There's some of the new models. People are pretty pumped on them. Maybe bring them down to like 170, 160 would have been okay. But probably almost no institutional changes for Slaanesh, but they have made some colors green and some red. Also, just worth pointing out, even I was a little bit wrong about the Dark Egotist thing. While that is something that's there, it's actually not something that's new, even though it's colored green. I apologize. That was actually done in the last update. And instead, it's the fact that both Glutos and also Sigvald can now include any Hedonites, which includes demons, previously only able to take mortals. So that is a change, which means you can make a little bit of a more diverse roster if even you're taking Glutos. So next up, Sylvaneth, they've had a very small micro change to Gossamer archers that they cannot, with their Zephyr Spites ability, end the move in combat, which is moving after shooting. So no longer able to do that. That's been changed, which is good because barely anyone played Gossamids anyway. And when they did, it was just to do tactics. But they have also made some no points changes for Sylvaneth. Perfectly fine as an army. But what they have done, I mean, in the last Battlescroll update, to be fair, they did actually make it so that their forests were better, their terrain pieces. So they got like a 5-up ward save and some other stuff. So actually, I guess not too bad. But they have also changed it so that Belthanos, Drycha, and the Lady of Vines are able to take any Sylvaneth unit in their regiment. It's almost like locking units to certain heroes made a real problem of building army lists. And so now they're just freeing it up. In before the end of Age of Sigmar, where just every character could unlock every character, every unit as well. So, but that does give you more list writing options, which is good, because one of the main criticisms of Age of Sigmar 4 is that list writing is a little bit closed off and a little bit simple. So this gives you more list writing options. Not many, but some for Sylvaneth. So that's all Sylvaneth get. Okay, so it turns out something I think I did know, but like I think maybe like because of PTSD, I like drilled out of my brain. All of the faction FAQs are also in this same single document. So even though there were changes to Slaanesh earlier, there's also another change to Slaanesh later on. And so I'm going to slightly change my system where we're just going to go through all of the rules changes, then we'll do all of the points. Because otherwise I think I might lose my mind. Because I don't know if you know this, the rules changes are done alphabetically and in 2 different sections. However, no, faction, they're on Grand Alliance and then in 2 different sections. The points are done alphabetically. No, whichever way around it is, it's a disaster. So the chat telling me that there's a word I need to learn, like a phrase I need to learn, information hierarchy. I don't know. That's why I make YouTube videos for you, so you can understand what's happening. So say thanks to me in the comments below, please and thank you. Anyway, Slaanesh have got a really exciting clarity on what happens with Dexessa. And if she gains any Fury tokens, with slain models. Now, what's really important for you to know about this is neither Dexessor or Accessor change points, and they're both garbage. So I don't know who's even playing them worldwide, and also why this would be a question, but there you go. It's been answered. Okay, so they have also changed the ability for Vanguard Chamber units for Stormcast Eternals. It's exactly the same ability. However, they've changed it to once per turn army in your hero phase. Easy peasy. Nice, simple change. Brings it in line with some of the other armies that have once per turn army, but doesn't bring it in line with other armies who have it do abilities all the time. So it depends which army you're playing. So that's been changed. So I guess a nerf to Vanguard units. This is kind of good as well because it affects Paladors, which have got a buff from how obscuring terrain works, but now have got a nerf from this, which is good. But Palador units are pretty expensive. Sometimes you see 2 6s, but often you see a 6 in conjunction with other units. So you're probably still okay, but a little bit of a change. Next up, we've had a big FAQ for the Gloomspite Gitz. The first change has been to Scragrot the Loon King and to one of his War Scroll abilities, which is Babbling Wand. Previously, it was a reaction, but now it's just a passive ability. Each time a friendly Moonclan unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit uses redeploy command, no command points are spent. So that's just changed to a passive. It's a minor change, but it's a nice clerical change, I guess. The next one's one of my favorites. This is the Snarboss on Warwheeler, one of the new miniatures that was released with the Git mod release. They've removed the non-hero specification from the first sentence of Keeping Up with the Boss. I know you're not going to be 100% certain on what that is, so let's go look at it. Previously, it was a reaction to you declaring a fight ability for this unit. And previously, you had to pick a non-hero Sunstealer Wheeler unit that has not used a fight ability, and then you can fight simultaneous or one after the other. That's how they work. This is the ageofindex.com/Battlescroll, if you'd like to compare stuff, by the way. However, we've now seen that they've changed it so the hero restriction is removed, and you can pick a friendly Sunstealer's unit that has not used a fight ability this turn and is within this unit's combat range. So you can fight simultaneous, and it can be a hero unit. That's been removed. Okay, fun. Now, my next question is, can you chain activate all of these Snarboss on Warwheelers? There are 180 points for one, which is quite a lot of points. And can you chain activate them? And I'm not 100% certain if you can, but what we did, again, using the website, we just mathed out the damage that just one Snarboss on Warwheeler does. And we can see that it does a pretty, well, against anything with a 3-up save, it only does about 4 damage. But if it's got like a 6-up save, then it could potentially do up to like 8 damage. So chain activate 10 of them. Make sure the enemy has a 6-up armor save, which many enemies do in this game. Weirdly, a lot of people choose the 3-up armor save units, in which case we're only going to do 4 damage, which is a little bit disappointing. That's with +1 to hit, sorry, I should be clear. Without +1 to hit, it's only going to be 2 damage. But if we have 10 of them, that's going to be 20 damage against a 3-up save, all chain activating at the same time. There's obviously issues with like getting the base around and stuff, but there we go. So that's a nice change. That's helpful. They've also changed Snarlfang Riders because previously they were a little bit better and their wolves hit on 3s. So now they've changed it to hit on 4s because they obviously don't want you to buy those models. And they have made a change to Army of Renown to King's Gitz. So the Army of Renown for Gloomspite Gitz, they've made a couple of changes. They've clarified the King's Adjutant ability. They've also clarified that the Moon-Hound Shiv has stacking +1 attacks. They've also cleared up the Loon King's command. And then lastly, they've also answered a question, a frequently asked question about Lunar Squigs, which is in for any of the armies, where under like the Bad Moon or the Moon and the Loon, then you get to have a move value of 4. Does this mean that's your move value, or it replaces the does that replace the entire move characteristic, or only the randomly generated move characteristic? Because they have a base move plus a d6, and it replaces the randomly generated move characteristic. So it's your base move plus 4, which is a nice piece of clarity. Other than that, just some really funny changes. But we'll go look at the points in a bit. Next up, one of the worst performing armies in the game, Kruleboyz, got a couple of changes. The first change we got to the Breaker Boss of Marbo Troggoth, who, because he's a monster, has got his control characteristic changed to 5. Pretty minimal change, but I don't think Kruleboyz players have been mad about that. The other change is to the Scare Gob Totem and to their passive, the Sinister Stare. Now, previously, it did a lot of stuff, including choosing your opponent to do dirty tricks against, and there's a really long thing here about what it previously did. What it does now, and this is the important thing, which is an upgrade, is you add one to dirty trick rolls for friendly Kruleboyz units while they're holding within 12 inches of this terrain feature. If the terrain feature is a Shouty Boss, which is a character garrisoned on it, then you can add one to dirty trick rolls for friendly Kruleboyz units wholly within 18 inches of this terrain feature. So this means only dirty tricks that target your units are relevant, but you're going to get +1 to those rolls, which is great. And obviously means you can no longer target enemy units. So this is just a straight buff for Kruleboyz, which they genuinely really need. Hopefully we see some also massive point changes. Next up, we're looking at the rules changes for Skaven. We can see that the gnaw holes, which previously had to be deployed 3 inches away from terrain, 9 inches away from the enemy, 3 inches away from an objective, and 3 inches away from terrain, can now be within 1 inch, 1 inch away from a piece of terrain, still 3 inches away from an objective, and 9 inches away from the enemy. That's good. That's more opportunity to put more gnaw holes down. Also, we've seen a change to Storm Fiends, specifically the change to the Grinder Fist Tunnelers, which let the unit come in from reserve or deep strike or a load of other mechanics that you could hear about. That's changed to once per turn army in any movement phase. We have seen a very successful Storm Fiend list of 18 Storm Fiends doing very, very well. The win rate for Skaven is fairly low, but the Storm Fiends specifically have been egregious. No, maybe not egregious, but very, very strong. And 18 of them have been very popular and they've been doing really, really well. Now you can't pop up all 18 in your opponent's turn and smash them and do whatever. Now you've got to do it in little stages. Maybe we'll see that go away. Maybe we won't, though. Maybe it just isn't quite as effective. Small little micro change there, but that's a good change because that was a pretty strong list that was doing very, very well. The next army we're going to look at are Slaves to Darkness, and they've got 2 changes. One that's pretty massive for the game as a whole. The first one, or the first change we're talking about, is change the Pledge of Slaanesh, which is where you can pick a unit to be pledged to a certain god, which previously gave you a 3d6 charge. They've changed that now to you roll 3 dice and you pick the 2 highest. That's taking it from a statistical average of 11 down to 9, which is pretty good. Also has capped the hard limit of how far that charge will be, which will be 12. Now you're up to it's now 12. Previously, you could have potentially spiked to big 18, which people would do. With a reroll, it's pretty high likelihood that you can get a big charge off. So that is the change to Slaanesh. But I mean, it's not too tragic a change because also you've got access in the spell lore for Slaves to Darkness to 3d6 charge anyway. So maybe you'll choose one of the other okay buffs that you can give to units to pledge them to. Although that was arguably the most popular one. They've also changed the Slaughter Brute. Now, the Slaughter Brute is pretty cool because obviously with the change to Prized Beast, which you can potentially make this guy +1 to hit and ignore battle damage, they've changed his Sigils of Domination ability, allowing you to no change here, still charge on 3d6 with a Slaughter Brute, and you can ignore the effects of the companion weapon ability. Now, the reason that that's important, if we go and take a look at his War Scroll, or its War Scroll, sorry, you can see that both its Mighty Jaws attack and also Razor-Tipped Claws can still get +1 to hit naturally because companion weapons can from all-out attack. But because it's got the pledge to Khorne, it could have +1 attack to its attack profile. So you could have +1 attack to its 8 attacks there and +1 attack to its Mighty Jaws. However, if we take a moment to look at its damage output, we can see its damage output is pretty woeful. Even with +1 attack on its 2 different profiles at 220 points, there are loads of other more significant damage dealers you can have in an army, especially Slaves to Darkness, than this guy. So unfortunately, that's probably going to take his pick rate from 0 to continue to be 0. But for the whole meta game, Slaanesh being nerfed a little bit is pretty healthy, although I still think you're going to see Slaves to Darkness dominance be pretty high. Moving on to Stormcast Eternals, we can see that Ionis Cryptborn has been given the Ruination Chamber ability, which is nice and deserved. And also, we can see that Vanguard Chamber ability we talked about, which has changed to once per turn army, also affects all of the other Vanguard Chamber units that you can see here, like Vanguard Hunters, Paladors with Shock Hand Axes, Long Strikes, etc., etc. So that change is good. Because it means that some of the Vanguard units, which were some of the most popular, Long Strikes and Paladors specifically, have taken a little bit of a nerf, which is really effective because they are an incredibly good army that does really well in the 4-1, 5-0 bracket at events. With all the rules changes over, it's time to look at the points, and we are just going to buzz through these because, as I said, some are very small. So quite a lot of green, which is points going down for the Cities of Sigmar, which is our first army that we're going to cover. Like I've said, on the big models like the Battle Mage, it's not really a big deal. Free Guild Marshal and Griffin also down 20. It's like an okay piece. Pontifex coming down 30 is good because the Pontifex is a utility piece and you want those utility pieces in your army. Talia Vedra still come down 30. And honestly, I can kind of see Talia a little bit. Again, 30 points that's a big number for Games Workshop. Games Workshop realize they've messed up with those War Scrolls. They're dropping the points. But Sigmar is already an incredibly cheap army, and there will eventually be a bottom, which they are going to hit. Dark Riders, Dark Shards, Drakespawn Knights, Executioners all went up points, as well as Hammerers and Rune Lords. I'm pretty certain they'll go up as well because they were super, super popular. The Charybdis, still perfect, as it always has been. World of Corpse Hunters also down points as well. Free Guild Cavaliers went down points, so it's definitely the human portion of the list has dropped, which is good. Although many of those elements were not featuring at all, at least in tournament Cities of Sigmar list, and it was much more about the elves and the dwarfs. Is that enough of a change to you to add one additional unit into the army? I don't know. Many of these units, like the Free Guild Marshal on Griffin or the Battle Mage on Griffin, weren't seen at all. So maybe not. And instead, have they reduced any of the units, like the Cavaliers that came down points? I'm pretty certain, unless I'm just making that up. The Cavaliers did come down 10 points to 150. Is that enough to get enough Cavaliers in for a small unit of another 5 Cavaliers or something? I'm not really sure. I don't think that's enough for Cities of Sigmar, but we'll have to see. Okay. World of Corpse Hunters, though, 10 points is good. That's not too bad. But again, those point changes are literally nothing. Daughters of Khaine, they've just added that the Bloodrack Shrine and also the Cauldron of Blood can include any Daughters of Khaine units. Again, and I probably should say this now, they have really opened up your list writing for some of the armies, so you can include loads of different units in an army in a game where most armies only run about 2 to 3 drops, because the way you build the list is you have your hero and then you have your units inside the hero's regiment. You're only taking so many heroes, so they make it so that you can just be a 2-drop or a 3-drop for your army, and you don't have to awkwardly take a random other character just to unlock the unit you want to take. So that's a good change from list writing. Might as well just go back to the old list writing, in my opinion, but there we go. Now, Fyreslayers. Again, they haven't opened up what units you can take, but they have reduced some of the points. Auric Flamekeeper down, Magmadroth down, Grimwrath Berserker up. That's because people were spamming the Grimwrath Berserker. And then Hearthguard Berserker's up, Volkite Berserker's up. Now, Fyreslayers were doing okay with some of these units, but the player base is so small and the people playing them were so small. I feel like this is really miserly and unfair to that player base, which I think is unnecessary. Will it massively impact them? Maybe. They would normally take probably, it looks like they might lose 40 to 80 points. Is that enough for them to lose? Probably make no difference. Also, Daughters of Khaine, no other points changes. Feels a little, again, cheap as well. Would have liked to have seen something, but there we go, nothing. Fyreslayers, a nerf, I guess. Right, next up, we got Idoneth Deepkin. Now, as we discussed, Idoneth Deepkin actually currently very effective. Second best win rate in the game, highest T-Whip. So they're doing crazy. No points up apart from the Leviathan, which is only a 10-point change, which maybe affects a very specific meta list where it's like the Leviathan, 2 Eidolons, some more Sargard or something. But Volturnus has come down points and the Alapex has come down points as well. The only thing that could have come down points are Thralls because they're rubbish. But everything else not going up points means Idoneth Deepkin are sailing and they are happily this is really great for Deepkin fans who are already doing really well, and I expect Deepkin to be pretty dominant over the next 3 months. So shout out to the Deepkin. Kharadron Overlords, they got Brock went up 10 points, and the Admiral went up 20 points, and the Gunhauler went down 20 points. That's Games Workshop just changing 3 units so that you know that they remember they exist as a faction. But have they changed in how effective they are? No. The Frigates are the same, the Ironclads are the same, the Thunderers are the same, so they're just as good as they were, and they're not too bad. The problem for Kharadron Overlords is that the priority roll exists, not because anything else. They're great on a double, and they suck being doubled. So that's how they work. Lumineth Realmlords. Okay, so again, they've expanded out what units you can take. Like Avlanor can now take any Venari and any Alarith. Lior can take any Lumineth. Severith can take any Venari and Huracan, which is a change. And some of those units like Severith has come down, and Light of Eltharion has come down. But again, these are very small changes. Wind Charge is down 10 points after they went up 10 points and a previous nerf. You might see the Wind Charges back on the table. People are trying to make them work. Previously, when covering fire worked slightly differently, they were crazy good. And also their battle formation meant that they were running across the board. And they were at one point one of the better armies. But I can see Wind Charges hitting the table again. So maybe a little bit of a bonus to Lumineth. That's okay. For Seraphon, they put Croak up 20 points. Since they changed his War Scroll in the last Battlescroll update, he's featured in almost every single competitive list since, and has been done really well and has been very competitive. 20-point change is nothing. The War Scroll change that they made previously was excellent. The Old Blood and the Scarvet on Agrodon coming down is a nothing burger, but then being able to take any Seraphon units in them is good. Apart from that, the Stegodon going down points as well. 40 points, pretty impressive. I reckon Stegodon goes away eventually. Does it go into the old world? I wouldn't be buying a Stegodon anytime soon. That's an old-ass sculpt. However, if you are a Seraphon fan, you are over the moon. Your Hunter Haunchy didn't change points. Your Croxy didn't change points. So you're really happy with this change. Your Starseer didn't change points. So you're really happy as a Seraphon player with this because you're currently very good and excellent. Also, your Saurus Guard didn't change points. So generally, this is a buff because you should have maybe taken a little bit of a hit. Going to Stormcast Eternals, Celestin Prime came down points. Again, a model I expect to go away sometime soon. Please don't pick one up. But if you do have one, I reckon that will see play. Loads of other units didn't change. Lord Commander Bastian Karthlos also changed. And the Lord Celestial Stardrake, super popular at the moment for its ability to eat large elite models, can now take any Stormcast Eternals, which is massive stonks. Already a unit people were taking. Sorry for saying the word stonks. Already a unit that people were taking, and additionally now can take loads of a variety of units. That's excellent. Bastion down points. It's not bad for Bastion. Imperator down points is crazy because we also know that they drop down the Annihilators, and Annihilators are Meteoric Grandhammers. The Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers absolutely smash. But they don't have to fight twice like you see with Chosen. Down to 190 points. They can do some incredible work. They've got teleports and other stuff to maybe get them around the board. That's good. And then Annihilators with shields down to 140 points. Not bad either. But I think the Annihilators with Meteoric Grandhammers might be something you see in the future. And then also, because both of those and Bastion have dropped down, that means that the Bastion Army of Renown that they built might be something that you also might see play in the future. Also, my favorite Neve Black Talon has dropped 20 points. Let's go. That's for a whole little regiment, which is really good. Easily, in my opinion, the best War Scroll you can play in Age of Sigmar 4 if you want to have a fun time. Run and charge, fight, do a teleport. Very, very cool. Ynastra down points as well is great. You absolutely love that. If you notice, and this is a real problem for competitive Age of Sigmar, no reds, or I don't think I've seen any so far. Nothing up. So Palador's not up. Wild. As some people might say, well, Rob, they can only do run and charge once per army now, or whatever it might be. I don't know. I think that they're great. Paladors are up. Do I need to keep scrolling? Oh, Paladors. Are they? Do I need to keep scrolling? Hold on. No, Paladors are not up, which is important, but very few red, which is excellent. Annihilators, like I said, and then you can see that Prosecutors went up 10 points. Still a bargain. I was going to say 6 prosecutes for 130 points, still amazing. Not a problem as well. Quest of Soulsworn coming down is good because I feel like Games Workshop really want you to take the Quest of Soulsworn in Stormcast Eternals and play the way that they want you teleporting and making stuff strike last and strike first. But they made them too expensive straight off the bat. Sequitors came down 50 points, which is nutty. And then Hurricane Crossbows went up 10 and Vigilers went up 10, which was a key tech piece in many Stormcast lists. But if you're a Stormcast player or if you're someone who plays Age of Sigmar right now, if you're a Stormcast player, you're over the moon. This has gone really, really well for you. If you're someone who's been playing a lot against the most popular army in Age of Sigmar 4, 12.5% of the meta, you're going to be a little bit frustrated and disappointed that some of the strongest units weren't affected a little bit because it's an incredibly good army, massive T-Whip, very, very effective. I know the win rate only says 50%, but when 12.5% of the population, or at least in tournaments, is playing Stormcast Eternals, that means you have to play a lot of 3-up saves. You have to play a lot of X. It really defines and shapes the meta. It's pretty tough. Moving on to Sylvaneth, you can see, I talked about this already. No points changes, but you've unlocked more units for Sylvaneth. I think Sylvaneth are in a good spot. They're okay. They're a good army to play. They're in that kind of like 3-2-4-1, sometimes 5-0 bracket. So Sylvaneth in good, and they've come out well there. Beast of Chaos, we've seen some changes to the Bestigor, the Great Bray Shaman, Dragon Ogres, and Ungor. Dragon Ogres have come down. This is going to be where the points will sit. Don't forget, in 3 months' time, they become an unofficial army. They become an unofficial army or no longer legal. We'll have to see what the tournament scene decides about that. I can't see why they wouldn't be allowed to just play in the summer unless we're getting something like army-specific battle tactics, which means they wouldn't be given any. But there's no reason we couldn't come up with some fan ones, right? But 3 months' time, Beast of Chaos maybe not be playing. We'll have to see what the community says. But Bestigor spam, still probably very viable. Blades of Khorne. Now, they got a little bit of a boost, actually, in the last Battlescroll update. Specifically, they made Wrathmongers and Blood Warriors maybe a little bit too cheap, and we saw a DPT meta, so damage per turn meta. And Blades of Khorne now, I've got the Bloodmaster went down. Bloodthirster Incensant Rage came down 10 points, which is so dumb. And then the Bloodthirster of Infected Fury went up 10 points. Like, it literally means nothing to the game. But they are now able to take any Blades of Khorne in their regiments. But those 10-point changes are genuinely really stupid. Realmgore Ritualist up 20, Skullmaster down 10. Now the Blood Warriors, which is exactly what I was talking about, went up 10, and the Wrathmongers went up 10. I still think 220 points for 10 models, which is 20 health, is pretty okay. I think that might make them on par with Warriors of Chaos. But obviously, there's also the fact that they do damage when they die back. And Wrathmongers going up from 120 to 130 is okay as well. But ultimately, I think this is okay for Khorne. They took a nerf on the units that you were taking, 10 points here or there. Is that enough? Probably not. Not to change where they are. It's definitely not making them any better. And it's not making them any worse. And I think they're genuinely okay. I think they're in that kind of middle bracket, especially if you only lean into the Blood Warriors and the Wrathmongers. Sapples of Tzeentch, who got pretty heavily nerfed in the last Battlescroll update, as well as points changes, but have had a bit of a resurgence on the tabletop. Had the Changecaster come down 10 points, Changeling go up 10, and then they had Screamers go down 10, and Zangor Enlightened on Disc of Tzeentch go down 10 as well. Pretty nothing burger changes. I think Tzeentch is still in the same spot they were, and they're doing okay. Slaanesh, we've unlocked more units which can be in the regiment. So Glutos can have any Hedonites. Sigvald can have any Hedonites. Shalaxi came down 30. Sigvald came down 20. And Blissbarbs went up 10. Not enough of a change on some of the units to get a lot of bodies on the board. Glutos and Shalaxi and the Keeper of Secrets all integral to making any sort of Slaanesh army work. Keeper stayed the same, and Shalaxi and Glutos didn't come down points, but didn't go up points. So actually, Khaine have come out okay on that. No changes are normally a good change, I'd say. Maggotkin of Nurgle. Now, Maggotkin of Nurgle definitely producing the DPT army, which would be all Blight Kings all the time. I think you're going to wait to see. Like, that's still something that's emerging inside the game right now. But Lord of Affliction's down 20, Lord of Blight's up 10, Lord of Plague's down 10, Orgot's down 20, Rotiger's down 30, Beast of Nurgle down 10, Puskul Blightlad's down 30 is actually crazy good for Nurgle. And importantly, Blight Kings have not gone up. So I'd say Nurgle are on a straight win path now. You're probably going to see more and more Nurgle armies on the table. So last 3 months, it's going to be a real problem for sure. Skaven. They have changed a bunch of who can take what. Kritok can now take any Skaven as an example. So can the Corruptor, the Deceiver, the Warbringer. So you can take any Skaven in them. That's good changes. The Warlock Engineer and the Master Mortar went down 10. Hellpit Abomination went down 20. Rat Ogres went down 10. That's not bad. Rat Ogres are really good. That's not bad. Like, again, 10 points is nothing, but Rattling Warp Blaster's a bit trash, went down 10. Warp Lightning Cannon went down 10, and Warlock Giselles went down 10. So nothing really to write home about with Skaven, but nothing went up. The major change here, obviously, is to the Storm Fiends, but nothing went up, which is good. And there are still some play in the Skaven roster. Lots of Clan Rats. We've seen be a thing, 180 Clan Rats, and also, so that'll be a locked-in team, locked-in list for Worlds, in my opinion. And then also all Rattling Guns is still a thing. So there you go. So that's Skaven. Perfect. And then we've got Slaves to Darkness. Abraxia went down 20. Archeon went down 10. It's so dumb. It's so dumb taking Archeon down 10 points. I could talk about it forever. Be'lakor went up 20. Be'lakor could go up 50 and would still see play. So that's a nothing burger as well. A bunch of characters you're never going to see because they're not Be'lakor have been able to take Slaves to Darkness in any Slaves to Darkness units. Yeah, Be'lakor change is Archeon change is a 1.15% reduction in points to give some context. Demon Prince went down 20. It's not too bad actually. Demon Prince down 20 is okay. Exalted Hero Chaos down 20. Some other stuff is the Gaunt Summoner, which is pretty big in the Pokeball list, which is you take a bunch of Slaanesh chosen, stick them inside a Gaunt Summoner, teleport them, throw them out, do a charge. Was very popular. Now it's more expensive, and the Slaanesh thing doesn't work anymore. So that's that down. The Ogor Mimrodon, which for some reason has seen play because you could take Ogor Therodons with it. Is down 20, and Chosen are up 20 as well to 280 points. Now, this is pretty unfair, really, because Chaos Chosen are going up points because of their once per game ability to fight twice. I think Chosen would be much better to come down points and lose fight twice. Now, let me know in the comments what you think about that, but that's been the big change. Here, going up 20 points, so they're now a ludicrous amount for what they have, but you're paying for that once per turn ability to fight twice. Maybe Chosen players think it's worth it. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But the major issue, obviously, then the Legion of the First Prince Blood Crushers have come down points. So Legion of the First Prince, they're trying to make more viable, and they've also put Varangard up 10 points as well, which is not enough. And also too much at the same time for the same reason I talked about Chosen. You've got an elite unit that can fight twice. So it's a bit of a skill expression moment for when you're going to make them fight twice. Save that resource, use them in the right situation. But when you do, it can be fairly obnoxious. If they just removed the ability, then maybe you would see more viable play inside this book. But because this book is such a badly internally balanced book, you're just going to see the units that can smash continue to smash. So yeah, I think that this is neither a good change for Slaves to Darkness players, nor is it a good change for the game. So that's my hot take if you're interested in that. Right, Flesh Eater Courts. A Boron Cardo went up 10. Then a bunch of the monsters, the Zombie Dragon and the Terrorgeist ridden by Ghoul Kings came down 20. But the big news, obviously, is Morbeg Knights up 20. We talked about this already. Ushran up 20 is a bit pathetic and a bit miserly. But Morbeg Knights, you might not see as much Morbeg spam, especially with the change that we saw to how they work. But I think, you won't see as much. But people can just pivot to Crypt Horrors, which they're still already playing as well, because they're still very cheap. There's now a 40-point difference between 3 Crypt Horrors and the Morbeg Knights. Let me know in the comments below what you're going to do. Right, now Nighthaunt. Nighthaunt have made it so that Night Shrouds and Night Shroud on Ethereal Steeds, any Nighthaunt unit can now go with those. Apart from that, apparently they're perfectly pointed, even though when we look at the stats, we can see that they've only got a 42% win rate. So one of the worst performing armies. I think that is a little bit unaware of where Nighthaunt have ended up, especially in a much more smashy meta. Their ability to ignore Rend is good. but they don't ignore Moors. I know they can get a 5-up ward save, but they definitely are suffering now, and players have moved on. There were a lot of players that were playing Nighthaunt when they were too good, and then they left, and they artificially increased its win rate. Then they've left, and the regular Nighthaunt players are now just struggling with their armies. So I would have liked to see some point changes to some of the units. I'd like to see the Black Coach come down 40 points, I'm going to say. I think that's a fair shout. But let me know in the comments of the changes below. Let me know the changes you like to see in the comments below. Ossiarch Bonereapers aren't doing too well at the minute. And then Archons come down 20, Bone Shaper, Soul Reaper, and the Gothizzar Harvester coming down 30. This is Games Workshop still trying really hard to make the Gothizzar and Immortis, not the Immortis, the Mortek Guard happen. Are they going to make it happen? I don't know. How cheap does everything have to be to make it happen? Let me know. This is good though for Bonereapers. I guess this is a bonus. I think people will be happy that Archon's 20 points cheaper, but really it's an incredibly small percentage change. You don't get a new unit in your army because Archon's 20 points cheaper, so don't buy into the hype. Soulblight Gravelords gets a new book soon, so that's not really going to matter. Moving on to Gloomspite Gitz, they did change the base sizes here, but that's because the base sizes that were provided in your Git mob boxes were the right size, and the app and also this sheet had the wrong sizes. So there you go. And then we saw the Fellwaters come down. Loon Smasher Fanatics come down 20. Now, obviously, there's the Kragnos, an all Loon Smasher Fanatic list, which people definitely want to run. Strike first with a bunch of those units. 110 points for 5. Pretty wild. 220 points for 10 Loon Smashers. Kragnos for 3d6 charge. Pretty fun. Shooters and Stabbers came down points as well. Only 10 points, but maybe if you could take enough, we'll have to see. Ultimately, 40 Stabbers is now only going to cost you 260 points. You can flood the board with Stabbers. 260 points means that you can get 160 Stabbers, and it's only going to cost you a little bit more than 1,000 points. Also, obviously, you can bring models back from the Loon Shrine, which is pretty effective. So maybe you'll see that. If anyone wants to put that together, I can think of one person that will. So please do stop him before he does. Seeking Snufflers as a support piece down 30 is really healthy. Ironjawz. We have got the Tusk Boss or Moor Grunter, which has become a little bit popular, has now been allowed to take any Ironjawz units in its regiment, which is a good change. Apart from that, no points changes. Ironjawz ended up being a little bit better than we think they were going to be after their new book launched. And we're seeing quite a lot of people smashing it up with the Brutes and even the Regiment of Renown, which I think might end up being really popular, especially in a teams format. So we'll have to see if that does. But no points changes is really good for Ironjawz, so they should be really happy. Kruleboyz, 10 points down on the Killer Boss on Gnashtooth. They've changed it so Swamp Boss Scumdrek and the Swamp Caller Shaman can take any Kruleboyz units. But apart from that, no points changes. We have had that small change to the terrain feature, which we covered earlier, for the ability to add pluses to your dirty trick rolls. But that's probably not enough. Do they need to make Gut Rippers cheaper so they go from 150 to like 140 or 130 even? Potentially they do. Some of the other units could come down cheaper as well. Snatcher Boss and Sodraker could be cheaper. The Breaker Boss on My Brute Troggoth definitely could come down to 200 points, and I don't think anyone would be mad about that. So there definitely could be some point changes for the worst performing army, and we didn't get any. So that's a little bit disappointing. The Ogor Mawtribes have had points up on the Huskard on Stonehorn and the Frostlord on Stonehorn. This is after the Battlescroll update where Games Workshop made it so that they could do a ton of mortal damage on the charge. Then later it'll be like, uh-oh, we need to add some points to these units. Now, is this going to be enough? Probably not, because you might lose a Stonehorn or either Frostlord Stonehorn or Huskard Stonehorn when you're spamming all of them. Like they might have done the math and been like, right, plus 20 points, it means you lose one. But they're still very, very effective. And you can still take all of your tactics units like your Frost Sabers for doing battle tactics and stuff, or Hunters. So I still think this list is going to work really well, and Ogres are going to be fine. The Gluttons came down 10 points. Should still be even cheaper. I'm going to say 200. Let's get gnarly with it, okay? And then Stonehorn Beast Riders also up 10 points for the same reason. Since the Battlescroll update, it became all monster trucks. They're doing very well. They need some points going up or something because they did a big rules change to make them better, and then they've had to do the points up. Exactly like we saw with Croak, but I don't think it's enough of a change that they're not going to play exactly the same. Okay. Then we've got Sons of Behemoth. King Brod went up 20, and the Kraken Eater Mega Gargant went down 20. Now, probably someone can tell me that this means that the list, the King Brod Stomp list, maybe doesn't work quite as well. Maybe you can't take 2 Gatebreakers or whatever it would be, and you have to now take a Kraken Eater if you're going to take a certain list. I don't know. I hate Gargants, but there you go. And actually, they're doing pretty well in the game. They got a 52% win rate. They're getting loads of 4-1s and even a couple of 5-0s. People are just pushing 4 people. Again, I would have liked to have seen written across here in big red letters, banned. But you can't get everything you want in life. And then we go to the Regiments of Renown, which I'm going to break down in another video because regiments are pretty fun. Ultimately, and some of them getting cheaper is really cool. Bundo Whalebiter sticks out immediately. I think a lot of people really like taking Bundo in their lists. So that's fun. And there's a bunch of other cool ones in here as well. Like I really, really like Snurk's Trogfire, which came out at Christmas, went down 20 points. Not too bad. Elwyn's Thorns isn't too bad either with 1 Archrev and 5 Gossamids. It's pretty fun. Then we see none of them go up, I don't think. Fulgoth Shudderhood coming down 10 points is cool because that actually saw play a lot already in lists. I'm just going to see what else came down points. Importantly, for Cities of Sigmar fans, it doesn't look like any of the ones that went up. None of them went up. So we didn't see Neve, and we didn't see the Saviors of Cinderfall going up points, even though people really have wanted them to go up points for a year. But I'm with Games Workshop on this finally, in that they should stay what they are. All right, so final thoughts, concluding thoughts about the update. I would say pretty weak. Did address the major issue in the game right now, which is Flesh Eater Courts. Okay, let's credit where credit's due. That's pretty nice. In before we see the major upheaval, which is going to be the new General's Handbook in 3 months, maybe the idea was just to kind of keep everything as it was. Just say, hey, the game is where it is. We're going to do the General's Handbook in the summer. Maybe there'll be some pretty aggressive changes. Games Workshop's problem and Age of Sigmar's problem is both an internal issue and also an external issue. We've only really covered the external issue here, like armies versus armies. But in many of the books, Slaves to Darkness always stands out to me. There's a massive, obvious problem with the internal balance, but they have done a little bit about that with changing it so that many of the units can be taken inside different regiments, which is actually a pretty good, like different characters now can take different units, which is actually a pretty nice change. I like that. That's nice. And I'm happy with that because at least people now can be like, oh, I can take a few more. I don't have to go for 5 drops or 4 drops. I can actually go for 2 drops like everyone else, which is good. And actually, just that small change might be enough. Not being forced into being a 3 drop, and even just being able to be a 2 drop and rolling off for first turn is nice. That's a good change, and we might see that might be enough of an impact. I don't know, but it's time for you to let me know in the comments below. Listen, important things to remember: loads of people are playing Age of Sigmar. Loads of people are enjoying it. There's loads of conversations about like there's those Skaven tie boxes Games Workshop are giving away, and like the list writing's a bit more bland, etc., etc. Feel free to express those feelings as well. But lots of people. I just came back from Adepticon with 195 people playing. Over 4 days, something like that. There was a singles event and a team event. Event numbers which were up from last year. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. So Age of Sigmar feels like on the tabletop it's in a good place, but many units aren't. But that's always been the story of Age of Sigmar, and also most of Games Workshop's games for the past 10 years. So let's try and be positive, have a good time. Let me know what you think though in the comments, and I hope you've enjoyed my review. If you would like to support what I do, then please let me know. Please join me on Patreon and join our Discord community, which would be cool. Thanks for watching. See you soon.